so for step two, for those students choosing the code space, we're going to cover this, what I think might be one. We'll see how many videos, but hopefully just one to set up the code space. And I say that because if you were doing local, it took three relatively small ones to do it. But for you all doing code space, we're going to learn how to set up, how to stop, how to start, and how to stop. Just to reiterate, typically the 28 students, the database students, will be using CodeSpace because of the SQLite. The 82 students, I recommend doing local, although I do like to give all students an option of using or showing them how to use CodeSpace, because there could be a time when your computer dies or you don't have access to it, and you can always set up a CodeSpace to do work. I would just say that if you are going through my local setup and you happen to set up a code space, make sure you understand how to manage those different locations of your repos. And don't worry if you don't know, come talk to me if you run into something like that. So 82, typically I recommend doing local because I think it's part of learning web development. And then in 893, which is so intro to web and then JavaScript, I recommend local as well. But I also understand that sometimes it just works better for you to have a code space. So you are dependent on the internet, of course, and your speed and experience there could be affected. But I've had most students have a good experience here. Okay, so over in Canvas for this item, I've given you some links, and one is to check usage. That's one of the things I ran into because I just started using CodeSpaces in the fall 2024 semester, and there was a learning curve for me as well. And one of the things that we found out is that students have a limit for 120 hours, and you can track how many hours you use. Most students, like 98% of the students using CodeSpace, did not run out. But if you did, it was generally because you weren't stopping and starting it correctly, which I'll show you today when we go through. But also you have an option to upgrade your account to, I believe, 160, which should be fine for most people. But I just want you to know there is a time limit on there, okay? All right, so to set up code space, you want to be on GitHub. Now remember this, if you're in 28, this would be 28. If you were in 82, that you'd be in the course organization. It doesn't, what matters is that whatever course you're in, okay? And if you're in multiple courses and using code space, you definitely want to make sure you're checking this. Okay, so just one last thing before we get started. If you were doing the local, you ended up cloning the two repos that I had you create, okay, the public and the private. Okay, but in this case, you'll set up a code space. Oh, sorry, you'll set up a code space for each one, because the reason you clone them locally is that you have them locally in a base folder, but when using CodeSpace you set up two different code spaces. So we'll start with the private repo. So you go into your private repo, you go over to code, and inside code, it may default into local. Again, it's kind of, the two concepts we've covered in this series as students who did local and now students who are going to do code space. So what you're going to do here is just click on create code space in main, and then it'll take it a minute here. It's actually setting up, check this out, it's actually setting up a virtual platform for you to use, or basically you can think of this as a computer for you, or a slice of a computer, not a full computer, but a slice of a computer for you to use. So now that's it. That's really all you have to do to set it up. Now, how you'll use it will vary based on the class that you're in. So I'm not going to get into class specific issues here, but I just want to show you a couple of things. So one thing is here, if you go down to the gear here and you go to themes, you can always play with your color theme. If you like a different color, you can play with that, which is kind of nice. I think, right? And then extensions actually were also here. Mostly 82 and 93 need extensions. We typically don't use them for database yet, so you should be fine there, but just know how to find them. And then you'll learn in the next video about how to do version control, but also in the code space, notice how the terminal automatically starts and it shows you, oh, you're in the private repo. If you ever needed to open another terminal, you could click here, or actually here, and it would open and it defaults to bash. And if you don't know what that is just a type of command line interface. Some of the commands, pwd shows you the current working directory, change directory if you had subdirectories here, which I will actually go over next. But I just want you to know, if for some reason you drop out of terminal and you're wondering where it's at, here you just go over to terminal, and you could also use your keyboard shortcuts to go in there as well. At the very bottom, you'll see actually the name of your code space, right? So remember, at this point, what is over on GitHub, and I'm just going to refresh this page because I want to show you that on GitHub, right? So in here, this is GitHub, and this is CodeSpace. So the CodeSpace is created for you, and then in a sense it copied, or if you know this term, cloned over into a slice of a computer for you to use. But as of right now, they are the same content, but as you get into the last step, you'll learn how to version control them. But also notice that this name, Bug-Free Palm Tree, is actually the name here, okay? So one of the things, and I talked about this in the billing cycle, is that if you were to just stop this tab, you might think, well, my code space has stopped automatically, and it doesn't. It actually hangs out there for 30 minutes. So again, manage these things well. If you're done for the day and you're shutting off and doing something else, then stop the code space. And I'm going to show you 2 ways today to do it. Okay, so let's say we're done and we're going to move on. So we'd come down here, and then you can just stop code space. That's one way to do it, and I think that's a fine way to do it. It's typically the way I do it when I'm in code space as well. The other way you can do it now is you could, if you were just going to close the tab, then, and actually let's just go ahead and do that, although it's really hard for me to do it because it feels wrong at some level, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. But over here, this is going to remain, like I said, this is going to remain active, right? There, and by the way, this shows no changes, which means what I have on my code space is the same as what I have here, which will be different in our next spot. And this says that it's paid for by me. It's not true. This is something I've reached out to GitHub to talk about, that this message is deceiving. It deceived me last semester because I thought it was your times were covered under our organization, and it wasn't. Okay, back here. Last thing. So over here, if you click here, you can actually just say stop the code space. Okay. And so if you stop the code space, then you can see that it is indeed stopped, right? So it was 4 minutes ago it was started, but now it's stopped. So the other thing, okay, so if something weird happens on your account, the other thing you can do is you can just blow it away, but here's what I would want you can just delete it. Now here's what will happen. If for some reason you've done changes in your code space and something weird setup wise you couldn't figure it out, and it was like you worked with me and we still couldn't, and I said, okay, you're gonna have to delete it. Understand that if you have deleted it before pushing, and this is a new term you're about to learn more about, if you haven't pushed your code to your GitHub, because this is where you turn things in, is over at GitHub, right? Your code space is where you work, right? Your GitHub is where you'll submit URLs for me to grade your work. So if you do that and you haven't pushed code to here, then you may lose something. So this is why it's just good practice, and I'll talk about this when we get to the next item. But if I wanted to fire that back up, so to speak, I'd come over here. Oh, I actually just go into it. I would have to click into here. And then what it would do here is it would just start that code space back up. So it spins up. This is a term we use when looking at virtual system setup. So it spins up a session for you to work. And again, that 120 hours is per month is ticking as you're in here, which is totally fine. Don't worry about that more than anything. Just understand what your number is over time and manage it well. Okay, I hope this helps you out. And now we get to do the last part of this. Good job.